Said earlier, we're going to talk about Teddy Roosevelt with his conservation things. And so let's move into this. Let's see what's going on. Now, as we moved westward, we were kind of taking these landmarks, etc. And Teddy Roosevelt was an outdoorsy guy. He loved to be outdoor. In fact, that's why we call him Teddy. He was on a hunting trip in Mississippi, hunting black bears. And so somehow in that they came up with Teddy, and the teddy bear that was, given to children was born off this man because of his light for nature, all right? So conservation is exactly what you see here. Conservation is where we keep nature in our future. We're going to conserve. That means we're not going to use it, this land. And thankfully, he set up a thing. Now, the biggest thing we have, of course, would be the U.S. Forest Service. This had been set up before. But out of this, we have such national landmarks as Old Faithful at Yellowstone. We have Yosemite National Park. We have the Grand Canyon. We have the Petrified Forest. We have Crater National Park. And so without these conservation things, probably society would have moved in and destroyed them, and there would be no history behind it. If you haven't been to those places, go. Get off your butt. Actually experience something. And you'll love it. All right? Now, enough of my soapbox. Now, and so here's a map. Basically, these are all the national forests in the United States. We do in national parks. We do have some in Mississippi. If you notice, there's Wild Oak Sea is probably the closest one. Arizona, California, Idaho, in that area has massive amounts. And so there you have that. All right. Now, these 16 arid and semi-arid states. Arid means really, really dry. I can't breathe too much. There's not enough water. I can't do anything. So, the New Land Reclamation Act, you can see it there, right? 1902. Texas became the 17th state as well. New Land Reclamation Act provided for irrigation and for water systems to be placed so people could live here comfortably. If you've ever been to Arizona, it's miserably hot. So how on earth can you have water in the desert? They have this really intricate system of pipes and waters, etc. Now the problem is, like in California where they had a drought recently, if water's not coming in to replenish these things and they're pulling some off the Pacific Ocean, they actually put restrictions on your water. You can't wash your car. Your baths are monitored, how long you can and cannot use it. And actually in Nevada, it's actually so dry they actually have to rely on the Hoover Dam. And the Hoover Dam actually powers the lights of Reno and Las Vegas. And so there's been little things going on, but that's the idea of New Land Reclamation, okay? Now, Teddy Roosevelt puts an old friend in charge of the U.S. Forest Service. His name is Gifford Pinchot, or Pinchot. He's put in charge of the U.S. Forest Service, and he comes up later on. And so we'll talk about him. But basically, he's the one put in charge of conservation. Okay? Now, Teddy Roosevelt also had made a friend. This wild man, right? Kind of looks like Mr. Clark, doesn't it, with that beard? This is John Muir. Okay? John Muir is a like-minded conservationist, just like Teddy Roosevelt, right? He wants to conserve nature. He wants to do all these things. He's an outdoors man, we can tell. But John Muir is also an environmentalist. Ooh, well, that's interesting, right? Environmentalist is a branch of conservation. But environmentalist says you are not going to put anything into that nature that would harm it. So this means there will be no cars, there will be no homes, there will be no things like that. It is straight as it is supposed to be, left intended, all right? Here we have Teddy Roosevelt with John Muir. They're actually at, where is that? Come on, Grand Canyon. So you have these things going on, right? Now, John Muir, as I said, environmentalist. I mean, John Muir is a friend of Roosevelt's. He liked conservation. He'll set up the Sierra Club. We'll get into in a second. And then also environmentalist. Don't put anything in that what's going to take away from beauty. He sets up an organization known as the Sierra Club, and the Sierra Club is still around today. You have the Sierra Madre Mountains, the Sierra Range in California. And so the Sierra Club is basically an organization you can join. They take donations from you, of course, fees, to protect these national parks, and you get into the parks for a discounted or free rate, I don't know, depending on how much you give. And that's what they're out to do, okay? Now, in Yosemite Park, we run into our first problem, okay? The idea here was this. We have this beautiful valley. This is the valley, right? It's called the Hetch Valley. It's in Yosemite. Now, Yosemite is a national park. And so the idea is, yes, we're going to conserve this area. But two things could happen. Environmentalist John Muir said, leave it alone. It's a valley. It wants to be a valley. But there's another organization, another type of people called a preservationist. All right, now preservationist, again, is a conservationist. They want to save it. But a preservationist means you want to save it for human use. Now, there's something interesting, right? For human use. Not just that, but can we go and enjoy this? Now, the problem is if you went into this environment here in this valley, it'd be probably pretty miserable. So what they decided, the preservationists wanted to dam this valley up, knock down these trees, and make it a river. And so the question was, should it be a valley or a river? And we call this the Hetchy controversy. This is, do we go into environmentalism over preservationism? Now, spoiler alert here for you. It's now called the Hetchy River. Here it is, right? Here's a kind of before picture of the valley when they started damming it, and here's what it more or less looks like today. And this is a kind of a place for, if you go camping in Yosemite, you can go swimming here and take your boat out there, and the idea is to enjoy it, right? To preserve it for human use, not environmentalist. And so that's a big little question going on. Now, how to be a preservationist, okay? Picnic under an old tree. You turn off the TV, you read a historic novel, you tour a house museum or two, sleep in a hotel, don't litter, go ghost hunting, drive a scenic byway, collect old stuff, share, stroll in the park, take a railroad ride. Anything that's going to, what they call, reduce your carbon footprint. Don't change it. Respect our nation's heritage. Leave it for our children so that you can, again, go and enjoy it. Now, an environmentalist, again, don't touch it. All right? Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is Teddy Roosevelt. He serves his 2 terms, and we have a 2-term tradition at this time. And so he passes his policies off to his baby. And so who that baby will be, we'll talk about here in a second.